Alone in the silence of the desert, she didn't expect to feel the warm weight of a baby falling asleep in her arms. The unexpected gesture of a warrior changed everything, and even the hardest hearts in the tribe surrendered. Subscribe to the channel and discover what happened. The Katinga was still asleep when Severina spread cloths over the dry earth, as she had done for as long as she could remember. The thread between her fingers was the only bond that remained with what she once called family. She lived in silence on the outskirts of Aracatu, in the interior of Bahia, where the winds brought more dust than promises. There were no children in her lap, no voice that called her mother, only the bobbin lace and the memory of the looks that had marked her like a hot iron. Barren, sterile, woman without purpose. The village had pushed her away not by decree, but by the cutting silence that followed her. She learned to survive where no one wanted to see her. She didn't beg. She didn't shed tears. She just wove, transforming threads into lace like someone transforming their own solitude into art. Time passed through her like wind through the mandakaru cacti, persistent, unhurried, without compassion. Her mud house was set apart, almost hidden among the palms and zeekzeeks, as discreet as her own existence. There she received abandonment like an old acquaintance. Each morning brought the same ritual, waking before the birds, fetching water from the stream that stubbornly refused to dry completely, preparing thin coffee, sitting at the loom. The government had declared a state of emergency 3 months ago. The drought punished without mercy. Water rationing was set to end in 15 days when not even the stream would resist. But that morning brought something different. The sound of footsteps on the cracked earth announced a presence that didn't belong to that forgotten place. Severina didn't raise her eyes immediately. She was accustomed to unexpected visitors, lizards, scorpions, hunger. But this presence was different, strong, determined. When she finally looked up, she saw a man standing before her, tall, covered in the dust of the road, with a face marked by deep wrinkles like the cracks in the dry earth. In his arms, wrapped in a cloth embroidered with ancient symbols that she recognized as tradition of the Kariri Zoko people, slept a baby. "Donna Severina?" His voice was deep like distant thunder. She nodded, suspicious. Nobody sought her out, much less knowing her name. "My name is Joachim. I'm from the village beyond the mountain." He offered no further explanations. He just observed, as if evaluating not with mistrust, but with a kind of contained faith. After a few moments that seemed eternal, he knelt before her, carefully uncovered the cloth and placed the child in her lap. Severina felt her body harden. Her arms hesitated. Her eyes filled with a moisture that she no longer recognized as tears after so many years. But upon touching the baby, something inside her calmed, like earth after rain. The little one, as if knowing an ancient secret, nestled against her chest and continued sleeping. "His mother?" Severina asked, knowing the answer before hearing it. "She passed during childbirth. The midwives tried, but the fever took her." Joachim looked to the horizon. "I cannot raise him alone. I don't have the means. In my village they say you have hands that heal and a heart that has never dried up, despite all the drought." Severina wanted to laugh at the irony. She, who had been expelled for being considered dry inside and out, now received a child from the arms of a stranger. "Why me? There are women in the village with milk in their breasts and respect in the community. I looked for someone who would understand the value of a chance, not an obligation." He took a small package from his waist. "Here is an herbal remedy to make milk flow. The elders prepared it. It will help in the first days. After that, the body responds." Severina had never heard that a woman who hadn't given birth could breastfeed. It seemed like a tall tale or a saint's miracle. "Does he have a name?" she asked, still not believing what was happening. "Gabriel, name of the messenger angel." Joachim stood up, adjusted his worn leather hat, and prepared to leave. "I will return when the full moon appears 3 times in the sky. If by then you decide you don't want to raise him, I will understand." He made a brief gesture with his head and turned to leave. "Wait," Severina called, surprising herself. "Why do you trust me?" Joachim stopped but didn't turn around. "Because they say that those who have never had anything to lose are the ones who best know the value of everything." And he left, leaving behind only the dust of the road and a completely rewritten future. The baby stirred in Severina's lap, opening his eyes for the first time. They were deep black eyes which looked at her without judgment. She felt something she had never experienced before, a silent call stronger than any word. The small hand closed around her finger, and in that instant, without warning, without permission, motherhood invaded Severina, like waters invade the banks during a flood. The next days would be decisive. Water was becoming scarce, the rationing deadline was shortening, and the village would soon know about the child. Severina had 15 days before the drought consumed the last thread of water from the stream. 15 days to find a solution. 15 days to prove, and to herself more than to others, that she wasn't dry inside. As she cradled Gabriel in her arms, she looked at the cloudless sky and made a silent promise. This child would know love before knowing judgment. The news spread faster than water on dry land. Before the third day, the village women were already whispering about the barren old woman who now had a baby in her arms. "She must have stolen it," said Donna Josefa, while picking beans at her doorstep. "Or it was abandoned at her door, the work of some wretched mother from the city," replied Clede, shaking her head in false piety. The words reached Severina, carried by the same wind that carried the dust. She was already used to being the subject of Arakatu's sharp tongues, but now it wasn't just about her, it was about Gabriel. The first night had been one of desperation. The baby cried from hunger, and she, not knowing exactly what to do, prepared the herbal remedy that Joachim had left. She drank the liquid bitter as gall, massaged her dry breasts, while murmuring prayers she didn't know she remembered. She slept with the boy glued to her empty chest, waking at every moan, every movement. At the dawn of the second day, the miracle happened. Few drops, but they were hers. Milk that sprang from a body that had never generated life but now nourished it. Gabriel sucked strongly, as if understanding the effort that body was making for him. In the following days, the drops transformed into threads, and the threads into small spurts. It wasn't much, but it was enough to maintain him. Severina learned to divide her time between the loom, which she now worked with even more determination to ensure sustenance, and caring for the baby. She improvised a cradle with an old wooden box lined with the softest cloths she could weave. At night, she sang softly lullabies that she had never sung to anyone. The heat was relentless. The water in the stream decreased each day, and the prediction was that it would dry up completely in less than 2 weeks. The mayor had already sent official requests asking for water trucks, but the government's response was always the same. "Wait, we are prioritizing areas with more inhabitants." Arakatu was just a forgotten spot on the map of Bahia. On the morning of the 5th day, when Severina went to the stream to fetch water, she found Marinalva, the village midwife, filling her buckets. The heavy silence between the two women was broken by the midwife's hoarse voice. "So it's true, then, that you have a boy with you?" Severina nodded without raising her eyes from the little water that still ran. "And where did this child come from, woman?" The question carried accusation. "He was brought to me. The father will know that he is well cared for." "And who would this father be?" "A man from the village beyond the mountain. His name is Joachim." Marinalva dropped the bucket on the ground, causing the precious water to spill. "Joachim from the Kariri, the one who lost his wife in childbirth?" Severina's heart accelerated. "You know him?" "Every midwife in this region knows him. We tried to save Irasima, but the puerperal fever took her. I thought the boy wouldn't survive either." Severina finally raised her eyes to face Marinalva. "Well, he survived, and now he's with me. And how do you intend to feed him? You who never gave birth?" There was challenge in the question, but also curiosity. "My milk came in, little but enough, and I work at the loom to buy whatever else he needs." Marinalva narrowed her eyes, as if evaluating a doubtful harvest. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and touched Severina's breasts over her dress. The gesture, which would be offensive in any other circumstance, had the authority of someone who had brought hundreds of children into the world. "They're full," murmured the midwife with amazement. "It's a miracle, or the devil's work." "Neither one nor the other. It's the work of necessity," Severina replied, stepping back. "The boy needs, my body responds." Marinalva was silent for a few moments, then picked up her bucket and filled it again. "I will visit you tomorrow. I need to see how this boy is doing." It wasn't a request, it was a notice. When Severina returned home, Gabriel was crying. Seeing her, he stretched out his little arms in a silent plea. She picked him up, feeling the warmth of the small body against hers, and knew that she would face the entire village if necessary. The next day, Marinalva appeared as promised. She didn't come alone. She brought Donna Conceição, the most respected healer in the entire region, a woman who was already over 80 years old and carried the knowledge of herbs and prayers that not even the priest dared to contest. The old woman entered the mud house without asking permission, as if the place belonged to her. Her eyes, almost hidden among the deep wrinkles, fixed first on Gabriel, who was sleeping in the improvised cradle, and then on Severina. "Show your breast, girl." Severina obeyed, unbuttoning her simple dress. Donna Conceição examined, touched, squeezed. Then she asked to see the baby. She checked every inch of the small body, the eyes, the mouth, the navel. "He is well cared for," she finally declared. "But the drought is coming strong and you have little water. How will you keep both of you alive when the stream dries up?" The question weighed like a stone. It was the same one that tormented Severina every night. "I don't know yet, but I will find a way." Donna Conceição approached Severina, so close that she could smell the scent of herbs that impregnated the old woman's clothes. "Joachim didn't choose you by chance, girl. Among all women, he came here. He knew what he was doing." "Why do you say that?" "Because 30 years ago, when you weren't even born, it was your mother who saved his life, when he was just a feverish boy abandoned to his own luck. She fed him, healed him, even when everyone said it was a waste of time." Severina felt her legs weaken. "My mother never told me that." "She didn't need to. Some debts are paid without fanfare." The old woman took Severina's hand between her own, calloused by time. "Tomorrow, at the end of the day, come to my house with the boy. Bring your loom too. From now on, you two will no longer stay alone here. But the village will learn that life has forms we don't understand. Start preparing your things, and save well the water you still have." When the two women left, Severina sat next to the cradle, watching Gabriel sleep. The small, peaceful face, oblivious to the storms that were forming around him. She needed to be strong for him now. The next day, she packed the little she had. She put the dismantled loom in a burlap sack, some clothes in another, took the few supplies she kept, and with Gabriel firmly tied to her chest with a cloth, walked toward the village for the first time in years. The gazes followed her. Some of curiosity, others of mistrust, few of sympathy. The children ran to see her pass, pointing and laughing, soon being reprimanded by their mothers. Donna Conceição's house was in the center of Aracatu, close to the small church of Our Lady of Conception. It was a simple construction, but larger than the others, with a porch covered by a climbing plant that, even in the drought, remained green. When Severina arrived, the sun was already setting on the horizon. She found the door open, and inside, not just Donna Conceição and Marinalva, but also 5 other women from the village. They all looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. In the center of the room, an empty chair waited. Severina hesitated at the threshold, feeling the weight of those gazes. It was then that Gabriel, who until then had been quiet, let out a crystalline laugh, the first that Severina had heard from him. The sound broke the tension, like water shatters the surface of a mirror. The women smiled involuntarily. Donna Conceição made a gesture for Severina to enter and sit down. "What is happening here?" Severina asked, still suspicious. "We are organizing," replied the old woman. "The drought will get worse before it gets better. We have to prepare." That night, while Gabriel slept in a basket lined with blankets offered by the women, Severina heard the plan that would change not only her destiny, but that of the entire village. And for the first time in many years, she felt that she was no longer on the margin, but at the center of something important, like the thread that unites all parts of the same fabric. Donna Conceição's plan was as simple as it was daring: to use ancient knowledge to find water where no one else believed it existed. "My grandmother, who was the daughter of a Kariri Indian woman and a Quilombola black man, taught me that there are plants that only grow where there is underground water. The umbuzeiro is one of them. And there is a century-old umbuzeiro on the lands that were yours, Severina, those that your father left and that the bank took after he departed." Severina felt a chill run down her spine. Those lands, which were about 3 kilometers from the village, were now the property of Colonel Jeremias, the most powerful man in the region and owner of the only market in Aracatu. "But the colonel will never allow us to dig on his lands." "We won't ask for permission," replied Dona Concheição with a gleam of defiance in her tired eyes. "The colonel is in Vitoria da Conquista, taking care of business. He only returns in 5 days. Time enough for us to find what we're looking for." The women spent the night planning. Each had a function. Marinalva knew the lands and would guide the group. Josefa, whose husband was a blacksmith, would provide the tools. Clede, who had 7 strong sons, would ensure help for digging. Dora, the mayor's cousin, would keep the authorities distracted. And Teresa, who never talked much but had strong hands despite her age, would help with the heavy work. Severina offered what she knew how to do best: weave. "I will make nets to carry water, lighter than buckets, and that hold more." When the first rooster crowed, the plan was defined. They would begin that same afternoon. During the following days, an unusual group formed. Women who had previously looked at Severina with disdain now worked by her side. The century-old umbuzeiro, with its deep roots, became the center of a cautious excavation. The men, initially skeptical, ended up joining in when they perceived the determination of their wives and mothers. At 3 meters deep, they found the first mark of moisture. At 4, the earth was already wet. At 5, water began to spring, first in drops, then in a constant trickle. It was a water eye protected by layers of earth and by the generous shade of the umbuzeiro. They built a simple structure to protect the spring and a collection system using the nets woven by Severina. The water was not abundant, but it was clean and constant, enough to supply the village until the rains returned or the water trucks arrived. Gabriel, now almost 2 weeks old, was growing strong. His round little face already sketched smiles when Severina sang, and his eyes followed the movements of her hands at the loom. The women took turns to help with the baby's care, brought food, little clothes, small presents. Dona Conceição's house, where Severina and Gabriel now lived, became the center of village meetings. But the peace lasted little. On the morning of the 6th day, when the official rationing deadline was ending and the stream was already completely dry, the dust on the road announced the early return of Colonel Jeremias. One of his henchmen had discovered the excavation and had immediately warned him. The man's arrival at the village was like a storm. Mounted on his imposing horse, followed by 3 armed men, he went straight to Dona Conceição's house. "Where is the old woman who authorized the invasion of my lands?" The shout echoed down the main street, making children run inside the houses and dogs bark, frightened. Severina, who was alone with Gabriel at that moment, Dona Conceição had gone to visit a sick woman, felt her heart accelerate. She placed the baby in the cradle and went to the door. "Are you looking for Dona Conceição?" Her voice came out firmer than she expected. The colonel, a man in his 60s, prominent belly and thick mustache, narrowed his eyes when he saw her. "And who are you? I've never seen you around these parts." "I am Severina. I lived away near the old stream." "Ah, the barren woman who now has a son." He spat the words with contempt. "The whole village talks about this absurd story." Severina felt her face burn, but remained firm. "What do you want with Dona Conceição?" "I want her and everyone involved in this invasion to pay for the crime. You dug on private property without authorization. This is a police matter." At that moment, Gabriel began to cry inside the house. The sound, sharp and desperate, made Severina turn instinctively. "Take care of that kid and tell the old woman she has until tomorrow to appear at my house and explain this affront. Otherwise, I'll call the police and everyone will go to jail." The colonel turned his horse and left, leaving a cloud of dust and fear behind. When Dona Conceição returned and learned of what had happened, her wrinkled face showed no surprise. It was to be expected. Jeremias was never a man to share anything, not even the water he doesn't use. "And now, what will we do?" asked Severina, cradling Gabriel, who was still hiccuping after crying. "Now we will negotiate, but we need a card up our sleeve." The old woman looked thoughtfully at Gabriel. "This boy may be our salvation." "How so? I don't understand." "Jeremias lost his only son many years ago. The boy was the same age as Gabriel when he was taken by a fever. Since then, his heart has closed like dry land." Severina hugged Gabriel more tightly, protective. "I won't use my son as a bargaining chip." "I'm not suggesting that, girl. I'm saying that sometimes we need to remind hard men that they too were once vulnerable children." The next morning, the whole village seemed contained, as if holding its breath. Dona Conceição, dressed in her best clothes, a faded but clean blue dress and an embroidered shawl, prepared to go to meet the colonel. Severina, with Gabriel in her arms, insisted on accompanying her. "No, girl. It's dangerous to take the baby. If we're going to use his innocence to touch the Colonel's heart, he needs to be present. Besides, I don't trust leaving him with anyone for so long. He still nurses." Donna Conceção sighed, recognizing the determination in Severina's gaze. "Then let's go, the three of us. But let me speak first. Colonel Jeremias's house was the only one made of masonry in all of Aracatu. Painted white, with blue windows and a garden that, even in the drought, remained green thanks to a private irrigation system. When they arrived, they were received by a maid with a frightened look, who led them to the main room. The Colonel was sitting in a leather armchair smoking a cigar. Seeing them, he didn't stand up. So the old woman finally appeared, and brought company. His gaze passed over Severina and stopped on Gabriel, who slept peacefully, oblivious to the tension in the environment. Something in the man's face changed for an instant, so brief that it was almost not noticed. "Colonel Jeremias," began Donna Conceção, "we've come to talk about the water." "There is nothing to talk about. You invaded my property, destroyed my land, and still have the audacity to come here as if you had some right." "The land has memory, Colonel." The old woman's voice was calm, almost melodious. "That umbuzeiro was already there when Severina's father was still alive. It was he who planted it, did you know? He used to say that where there is umbuzeiro, there is life, even in the most punished backlands. And what does that matter now? The land is mine, legally bought from the bank. Yes, the land is yours, but the water beneath it belongs to all who thirst." The Colonel stood up, his face red with anger. "Get out of my house, insolent old woman. I'll call the police right now." At that moment, Gabriel woke up. He didn't cry, just opened his eyes and looked directly at the Colonel, with that pure and innocent look that only children possess. The man stopped in the middle of his movement, as if he had been hit by an invisible blow. "How old is the boy?" he asked, his voice suddenly lower. "Almost 2 weeks," replied Severina, surprised by the change. "He was born on the last new moon." The Colonel took a step forward, his eyes fixed on Gabriel. May I see him closer?" Severina hesitated, looking at Donna Conceção, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She approached the Colonel, allowing him to see the baby better. The man's calloused hand, which had probably never touched anything with delicacy, rose trembling and touched Gabriel's cheek. The baby, instead of crying at the strange touch, smiled. It was as if a dam had broken inside the old man. His eyes, always hard and cold, filled with tears. "My son," he murmured. "My João had that same look." Severina felt an unexpected compassion. "I'm sorry for your loss, Colonel. It was so long ago. But the pain never goes away, you know. It's like a stone in the chest that never dissolves." He stepped away, turning his back to hide the tears. When he turned again, his face had recovered part of its hardness, but his eyes were different. "The village can use the water. I'll send my men to build an adequate structure to protect the spring, but with one condition." "Which?" asked Donna Conceção, already foreseeing the answer. "I want this child to be baptized in the church of Aracatu, with a feast the likes of which the village has never seen, and I want to be the godfather." Severina and Donna Conceção exchanged looks of astonishment. "And there's more," continued the Colonel. "The house where you are is too small for a child to grow up in. I have an empty property near the church with a large yard. You can use it for as long as necessary." When they left the Colonel's house, the sun was already beginning to set. The sky, usually relentless in its blue, showed the first signs of distant clouds. "What happened in there?" asked Severina, still stunned by the sudden change. Donna Conceção smiled, looking at Gabriel, who had gone back to sleep. "What always happens when innocence touches a hardened heart? It remembers that it was once pure too." The news spread quickly. In the following days, the Colonel's men worked at the spring, building a small dam and a distribution system that allowed everyone to have access to water. Severina and Gabriel moved to the house near the church, a simple but spacious 2-story building, with a yard where drought-resistant plants grew obstinately. The village women, now proud of their participation in the discovery of water, began to visit Severina regularly, bringing presents, food, stories. The loom was installed in the main room, where the morning light entered generously through the windows. It was there, working on the preparations for Gabriel's baptism, that Severina received the visit that would change everything once more. Joachim, as he had promised, returned when the full moon appeared for the third time in the sky of Arakatu. Joachim arrived in silence just like the first time. Standing at the threshold of the door, he observed Severina weaving while humming to Gabriel, who, now almost 3 months old, was already smiling openly and trying to reach the colorful threads that danced between his mother's skilled fingers. "I see you have prospered," he finally said, making Severina turn, startled. Their eyes met like old acquaintances who don't need words to recognize each other. Gabriel, hearing the unfamiliar voice, turned his head in Joachim's direction. For a moment, time seemed to suspend its course. Father and son looked at each other, separated by just a few meters, united by an invisible bond that not even absence could weaken. "He is strong," Joachim stated, finally entering the house, "and happy." Severina nodded, her throat suddenly too tight to speak. She had spent months imagining this moment, fearing that Joachim would come to take Gabriel away. Now, seeing him there, so close and yet so distant, she didn't know what to feel. "You have taken good care of him. Better than I could have." He is my son now," Severina managed to say, her voice trembling but determined. Joachim came closer, kneeling before Gabriel, who was lying on a colorful rug made by Severina. The baby stretched out his little hands, curious about the stranger. Joachim smiled, a rare and brief smile, and offered his finger for his son to hold. "I came to thank you not to take him away." The words fell like raindrops on parched land. "When I brought him to you, I was desperate. I didn't know how to raise a son alone, with the pain of loss still fresh. I thought that perhaps, after a few months when the wound had healed, I could come back and reclaim him. And now I see that he has found the home he deserves. You are the mother that Irasima would have wanted for our son." Severina felt tears running freely down her face. They were not tears of fear or sadness, but of relief and gratitude. "You will always be his father, Joachim. I will never deny that. And you will always be the mother, the only one he will know." Joachim stood up, taking from his waist a package similar to the one he had brought on the first day. "I brought seeds from my village, plants that resist drought but give sweet fruits, for his future." The simple gesture contained a promise. Joachim would not disappear from his son's life, but neither would he separate him from Severina. That night, while Gabriel slept, Severina and Joachim talked. He told about Irasima, about how they met, about the dreams they had for their son. She spoke about the last few months, the discovery of water, the change in the village's attitude, the approaching baptism. "Colonel Jeremias wants to be the godfather," she explained. "He's organizing a feast like Arakatu has never seen." "I know his story," replied Joachim, "a hard man who lost his only son. Perhaps Gabriel is a chance for redemption for many hardened hearts in this backlands." When dawn came, Joachim announced that he would leave at daybreak. "I will return for the baptism if you allow me. Of course, Gabriel needs his father present. I will not just be the father who visits. I will be the father who protects, even from a distance." At sunrise, Joachim planted the seeds he had brought in the yard of the house. His hands, calloused by hard work, moved with surprising delicacy. When he finished, he looked at Severina, who was watching from the door with Gabriel in her arms. "These plants will grow like him, strong, resistant, generous in their fruits." Before leaving, Joachim did something unexpected. He took from his neck a necklace with a small amulet carved in wood. It was Irasima's. "I want Gabriel to have it when he is older, and I want you to wear it until then, as a symbol of our trust." Severina bowed her head, allowing him to place the necklace around her neck. The amulet, warm from contact with Joachim's skin, seemed to take on a life of its own when it touched her skin. "I will care for it as if it were my own heart." Joachim nodded, and without further words departed. The following weeks were of intense preparation. Gabriel's baptism, scheduled for the Sunday following the feast of Our Lady of Conception, had become the most anticipated event in the village. Colonel Jeremias, true to his word, spared no resources. He had fine fabrics brought from Salvador for his godson's clothes, hired musicians from Vitoria da Conquista, ordered enough food to be prepared to feed not only Arakatu, but also the neighboring villages. The rains, which began timidly days after Joachim's visit, gained strength. The backlands, previously brown and parched, began to show brushstrokes of green. The water from the spring, added to the rain that fell generously, transformed the landscape and the people. On the day of the baptism, the sky dawned clear, as if it had washed away all the clouds during the night. The church, small and simple, was decorated with wildflowers and colorful ribbons. Severina, dressed in a blue dress made by her own hands, held Gabriel, who wore a white outfit embroidered with golden threads, a gift from the colonel. The priest, a young man recently arrived from Ilheus, smiled to see the church packed. Not only the residents of Aracatu were present, but also people from all over the region, attracted by the story that had already spread like legend. The barren woman who produced milk to feed a son who was not hers, and with that brought water to a dry village. When the ceremony was about to begin, a murmur ran through the church. Joachim was entering, accompanied by 3 elders from his village. He wore traditional clothes adorned with symbols that few there understood, but all respected. Colonel Jeremias, who was waiting beside the altar in his impeccable suit, stiffened for a moment, but soon relaxed. The gazes of the 2 men crossed, the powerful landowner and the indigenous warrior, united by the same feeling, love for that small life that now united such distinct worlds. "Who are the godparents of this child?" asked the priest. The colonel stepped forward, followed by Donna Conceição, who had been chosen as godmother. But before they could answer, Severina spoke. "Father, with your permission, I would like Gabriel to have 2 godfathers, besides the godmother." A murmur of surprise ran through the church. 2 godfathers? Yes, Colonel Jeremias, who gave us shelter and water, and Joachim, Gabriel's father, who gave us trust and future. The priest hesitated, looking at the colonel, expecting a negative reaction. To everyone's surprise, the old man nodded. "It's fair. A son needs all the blessings he can receive." The ceremony proceeded, moving in its simplicity and profound in its meaning. When the baptismal water touched Gabriel's head, he didn't cry. He looked around at the faces that surrounded him. Severina, his mother by choice, Joachim, his father by blood, the colonel and Donna Conceição, his godparents by destiny. The priest, sensing the importance of the moment, gave a speech that would remain engraved in the memory of all present. "Today we don't just baptize a child, we baptize a new way of living, where bonds are not defined by blood but by love, where the land doesn't separate but unites, where water is not a privilege but a right." Gabriel was born from one womb, but was nourished by another. He will grow between 2 worlds, carrying within himself the promise of union and renewal. The feast that followed lasted until nightfall. The colonel, proud of his godson, announced that he would donate part of his lands to the community, including the area where the spring was located. Joachim and the elders from his village performed a blessing ceremony, planting more seeds around the water source, ensuring that their roots would keep the soil firm and the water protected. When the moon rose on the horizon, Severina found a moment of quietude. Sitting on the porch of the house with Gabriel asleep in her arms, she observed the stars that sprinkled the backland sky. Donna Conceição approached silently, sitting beside her. "Are you happy, girl? More than I ever thought possible." The old woman smiled, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of decades. "Did you know that among our people there is an ancient belief? They say that when a woman who has never given birth manages to feed a child with her own milk, it's a sign that the heavens have chosen a special path for her. Do you believe that? I believe that some voids exist not to be filled in the way we expect, but to welcome something greater than we could imagine." Severina looked at the sleeping son, her son, not by blood, but by choice, by love, by destiny. "He will unite worlds," she murmured. "He already is," replied Donna Conceição, pointing beyond the yard, where the colonel and Joachim were talking, sitting side by side under an ancient tree. Severina's improvised house became over the years a meeting point. There people of all origins gathered, from the village, from the indigenous village, from distant cities. Gabriel grew up among stories, traditions, and diverse knowledge, learning to value both the letters taught in school and the ancient wisdom transmitted by the elders of the village. Joachim visited regularly, always bringing new seeds, new knowledge. The colonel, transformed by the experience of being a godfather, used his influence to improve life in the village. The lands around the spring became a small oasis, where drought-resistant plants flourished even in the most arid periods. Severina continued to weave, but not just cloths. She also wove stories, relationships, bridges between worlds. Her loom, installed on the porch of the house, was a silent witness to the transformations that a single act of trust and love could trigger. When Gabriel completed 7 years, strong and curious as his mother had always wished, Severina gathered courage to do what she had been planning for a long time: open a crafts school where she would teach not only how to weave threads, but how to weave lives. "Let's call it Dawn's Loom," she suggested, remembering what Joachim had once told her about his people's tradition, that dawn is not just the beginning of the day, but the rebirth of hope. And so it was. The school began small, with just a few students, women from the village who wished to learn the craft. Soon, however, it grew. People came from far away, attracted not only by the quality of the work, but by the stories that were told while hands worked. The story of Severina and Gabriel, repeated so many times that it had already gained the contours of legend, inspired other women to welcome children without mothers, other men to entrust their children to those who could love them better, other communities to share their resources. On a summer afternoon, when Gabriel was already a young man of 15, helping at the school and learning both his father's and mother's ways, Severina sat under the umbuzero that now grew strong in the center of the village. The sweet sour fruit in her hands reminded her of the path traveled, from exclusion to acceptance, from dryness to abundance, from solitude to the family she had built, not with blood, but with daily choices of love. "Mother?" called Gabriel, approaching with a smile that was the perfect mixture of Joachim's seriousness and Iracema's sweetness, whom he knew only from stories. "More students are arriving from Feira de Santana. They want to learn about the water capture system we developed." Severina smiled, proud of the son that destiny had entrusted to her and that she had raised with all the love she once feared she did not possess. She stood up, adjusted the necklace she had never taken off, Iracema's amulet which Gabriel would now wear when he turned 16, and walked alongside her son toward the future they had woven together, thread by thread, day by day, choice after choice. The village of Aracatu, previously forgotten on the map of Bahia, was now known as the place where water sprang not only from the earth, but from hearts that had learned the most important of lessons: that true love, like water in the backlands, always finds a way to flow, nourish, and transform. If this story of rebirth and bonds that transcend blood moved you, don't forget to share your impressions in the comments. Each story we tell is like a thread in the great loom of life, connecting hearts through words. Subscribe to the channel for more narratives that, like the umbuzero in the backlands, bring sweetness even in times of drought.